My name is Heidi, and for over a year, I lived through something I wouldn't wish on anyone. I wasn't just bullied at work. I was harassed, ridiculed, humiliated, and slowly erased in front of my colleagues, and even outside the office, and the worst part. It was my manager who orchestrated it all. But what he never expected was that I would outplay him at his own game. And in the end, his entire career collapsed in a way so brutal he'll never recover. I joined a respected marketing firm straight out of grad school. I was 25, ambitious, creative, and honestly, just excited to prove myself. I worked late nights. I handled clients with care. In my first year, I even won an award for a campaign that went viral. Everyone seemed supportive, until Matthew came along. He was promoted internally to be my direct manager, and from the first week, I could feel it, he didn't like me. At first, I brushed it off as a personality clash. But Matthew wasn't just indifferent, he hated me. And he made it his mission to crush me. It started small. He'd interrupt me in meetings, laughing at my ideas. He'd give me assignments, then change the brief halfway through, making me look incompetent. Soon, he escalated. He made jokes about me being too emotional for leadership, or told colleagues I was only good at playing nice with clients, not strategy. But then, it turned darker. He began harassing me privately. Little comments about my clothes, my voice, my body. Always subtle, always deniable. He'd stand too close, touch my shoulder in ways that made me uncomfortable, and when I pulled back, he smirked, like he knew I couldn't do anything. By month 6, my reputation was in shambles. Clients I used to manage were reassigned. Colleagues who once trusted me began doubting me, and worst of all, the same lies Matthew spread at work somehow started surfacing at social events. Like I was difficult, or flaky. Like I was difficult, or flaky, or worse, that I'd slept my way into opportunities. He wasn't just poisoning my career, he was poisoning my life, and for a while, I felt powerless. One day though, I got my first break. I was preparing a client pitch, when I overheard Matthew on the phone through his slightly open office door. He was laughing, bragging to someone about how he was managing me out, and that I was one HR complaint away from disappearing. My stomach dropped. But then I realized, I had my phone in my hand. I hit record. That was the first real evidence I had that this wasn't paranoia. Matthew was targeting me deliberately. That single recording gave me a spark of hope, and an idea. From then on, I became hyper-aware. I saved every email, every contradictory instruction, every inappropriate comment. I started keeping a journal of things he said and did, down to the time and date. At first, it was for my sanity, prove to myself that I wasn't imagining it. But then, something huge happened. A coworker, Anna, pulled me aside one day and whispered, "Hyde, I don't know if you know this, but Matthew's been telling people you tried to flirt with him to get ahead." My heart stopped. That was more than harassment, that was character assassination. I asked her if she'd be willing to put it in writing. She nodded. That night, I realized, this wasn't just survival anymore. This was war. Over the next 2 months, I built my case. Matthew sent me emails late at night with vague orders like, "Just figure it out. Don't embarrass me again." Then he'd berate me the next morning for doing the wrong thing. I baited him into giving conflicting instructions, then politely asked for clarifications in group emails where others could see the contradictions. Slowly, his mask slipped in front of others, then came the jackpot. He accidentally sent me an email that was meant for another manager. In it, he wrote, "Don't worry about Heidi, she'll be gone soon, I'm making sure of it." He didn't even bother to delete it, possibly because he wasn't even aware of the mistake he'd made. That's usually what happens with overconfident pricks, isn't it? Anyway, I forwarded that email to my personal account instantly. Now, I had a trail, a pattern of harassment, a pattern of sabotage, and malicious intent. But just when I thought I was ready to strike, something happened that nearly broke me. Matthew accused me of misconduct. Out of nowhere, HR called me in and said they'd received a complaint that I was being unprofessional with a client. I was blindsided and thought my career was over, that he'd finally cornered me. Although in hindsight, I think that perhaps later he did figure out that he had emailed me mistakenly instead of sending it to who he originally intended to email, which is possibly why he rushed in an attempt to handle the situation by accusing me of misconduct so abruptly, before I could show anyone his true face. What he didn't know was that his rushed fix would actually cost him his ultimate downfall. Although flustered by Matthew's sudden accusation, I suddenly remembered that every client call I had was logged. I requested the recordings through our system, and when HR reviewed them, not only was there no misconduct, but the client specifically praised my professionalism. It was evident that Matthew had fabricated the entire thing, but the HR brushed it off as a misunderstanding. But I knew better, and now, I had another piece of proof. He wasn't just harassing me, he was lying to HR. This was my breaking point. I compiled everything, the recording of him bragging, the emails, the contradictory instructions, Anna's statement, the fabricated misconduct claim, even screenshots of text messages where he'd written borderline inappropriate things. Then, I went nuclear. Instead of going to HR, I bypassed them completely. I sent a detailed, organized dossier to the company's legal department, the ethics hotline, and most importantly, the board of directors. It wasn't an emotional rant, it was a case file, bullet points, timelines, proof. Within days, the wheels started turning. Suddenly, Matthew was no longer in meetings. HR reached out to me, this time apologetic, almost groveling. An external investigator was brought in. Colleagues who'd been too afraid to speak up before suddenly came forward. Turns out I wasn't the only one he'd harassed. I was just the one who fought back. 2 months later, Matthew was fired for gross misconduct, but it didn't end there. Word got out in the industry. He tried applying for jobs at rival firms, but my company gave full disclosure every time. His reputation destroyed. Mine rebuilt. Not only did I stay, I was promoted 6 months later to a leadership role, the same role he'd once mocked me for dreaming of. Though, I sometimes wonder, who was he sending that email to in the first place? That second Matthew in the making, the other person who enjoyed belittling others and destroying their careers. I am sure after watching Matthew's fate unfold, they must have either corrected their course, or at least became cautious of such acts. And here's the ultimate justice. A year later, I bumped into an old colleague at a conference. They told me Matthew was working in retail managing a store in the mall. The man who once strutted around in designer suits, belittling everyone in his path, was now folding shirts for teenagers. I can't lie, hearing that was the sweetest closure I could have asked for, because sometimes, karma needs a little push, and if you've ever been humiliated, harassed, or made to feel small, remember this: evidence is power, patience is power, and the best revenge, it's not just surviving, it's watching the person who tried to break you crumble under the weight of their own cruelty.
My name is Amir, and for most of my life, I lived with the shadow of a lie. A lie that destroyed my father's career, broke his spirit, and stained our family name. Everyone thought my father was a fraud, but the truth is, the fraud was committed by the very man who accused him, and today, I'm going to tell you how I got revenge. My father was an accounts manager at a textile company in Karachi. He was proud of his work, honest, disciplined, respected, until one day when the company uncovered a massive embezzlement scandal. Millions were missing. My father tried to expose who was really behind it, a rising manager named Khalid. But before he could speak, Khalid flipped the script. He framed my father for the fraud, painting himself as the whistleblower. Khalid was promoted, hailed as the man who saved the company. My father was fired in disgrace. His reputation destroyed, his health collapsed, and he died years later, still branded as a thief. I was only 16, but I made myself a promise that day. One day I'd clear my father's name and make Khalid pay. I studied hard, got my degree, and applied for a job at the same company. But I couldn't reveal who I was. I changed my surname, used my mother's maiden name, and altered small details in my CV. To Khalid, I was just another junior hire. To me, this was a battlefield. And every day I walked past the office where my father, one Saturday, now with Khalid's name glowing on the door, Senior Director of Finance. It fueled my anger, but I knew I had to be patient. Khalid hadn't changed. He was still arrogant, cruel, manipulative. I saw him humiliate junior staff, sabotage co-workers, bend rules for his own gain, but no one dared challenge him. His reputation as the man who caught the fraudster made him untouchable. At first I gathered small things, snide remarks, shady transactions, suspicious emails, but it wasn't enough. I needed proof of a bigger pattern, and one night I found my first lead. I stayed late at the office pretending to finish reports. Khalid had left his office unlocked. Inside, I found a folder labeled confidential vendor payments. The numbers didn't add up. Some vendors didn't even exist. I copied the files onto a flash drive, heart pounding as I left the office. And then it hit me. I had just stumbled on the very same scheme he used years ago to frame my father. He was still at it, but this time I wouldn't let him win. I wanted to confront him, but I knew if I moved too fast, he'd bury me like he buried my father. So I kept quiet. Until one day during a team meeting, Khalid looked straight at me and said, "You remind me of someone. You have his eyes." My stomach dropped. Did he suspect who I was? Or was it just a coincidence? That moment told me one thing. I needed to act soon, before he connected the dots. I played it smarter. I befriended the IT guy, gained access to Khalid's company emails, and started digging. And what I found shook me. There were messages to offshore contacts. Instructions to create dummy accounts, payments siphoned into hidden bank channels. It was the same fraud pattern, almost identical to what he pinned on my father. I saved everything, every email, every attachment. But I needed one last piece, the smoking gun that tied him personally to the fraud. I got it by chance. One Friday, Khalid left in a hurry for a family emergency. He forgot to log out of his system. On his desk, his phone buzzed with a WhatsApp notification. I glanced at the screen and saw a message. Funds transferred. As usual, your cut is waiting. I snapped a photo. My hands were shaking. This was it, the final nail. But exposing him wouldn't just be about proving fraud. I wanted to expose the truth that my father had been innocent all along. I put everything together into a dossier. The fake vendors, the offshore transfers, the WhatsApp screenshots. But I added one more thing, archived copies of my father's old case. Records that proved Khalid's story back then didn't match the financial timeline. It was risky. If Khalid caught wind before I leaked it, he could crush me. But the universe had its own twist waiting. The company announced an internal audit. For the first time in years, Khalid wasn't in control. I waited until the auditors were in Khalid's office. Then I anonymously sent my entire dossier to them and CC'd the CEO. Hours later, Khalid was summoned to an emergency board meeting. The next morning, his office was sealed. And within a week, his decades of lies unraveled. The company realized not only had Khalid been running ongoing frauds, but that the case against my father had been falsified. The news spread like wildfire. For years, my father's name had been dragged through the mud, and now the truth came out. He had been the scapegoat. I didn't reveal myself immediately. I watched Khalid escorted out in disgrace, his empire collapsing, and when he tried to contact allies, no one answered. Only later, when the company officially cleared my father's record, did I step forward. I walked into the CEO's office, handed him my ID, and said, "I am the son of the man you wronged." My father was innocent. The CEO went silent. For the first time, my family's honor was restored. As for Khalid, last I heard, he was facing trial for financial crimes. A man once celebrated as a hero exposed as the real fraud, and my father's name finally was free.
My name's Daniel, and for almost a year, I lived through hell at my job. Not because of the work, not because of the company, because of one man. My manager didn't just dislike me, he made it his mission to destroy me, publicly, socially, professionally. What he didn't know was, I was quietly collecting every piece of evidence. And when the time came, I ended his career in a way he never saw coming. I joined a mid-sized consulting firm about 3 years ago. I wasn't the loudest guy in the room, but I worked hard. Clients liked me. My colleagues respected me. I was even on track for a promotion. Then he showed up. Mark, my new manager. You know the type, always in expensive suits. Fake smile plastered on his face. But behind closed doors? Venomous. From the very first week, he had it out for me. At first, it was small things. Mocking my ideas in meetings. Twisting my words. Making me the punchline of his little jokes. Everyone would laugh nervously. Well, because he was the boss. I brushed it off. Stayed professional. But Mark wasn't the kind of man who stopped when he saw weakness. He doubled down. And what started as jokes soon turned into sabotage. He started giving me impossible deadlines. Projects outside my role. Then he'd criticize me for underperforming. He'd CC higher-ups in email, exaggerating my mistakes. But the worst, he spread lies. He told another department head I was lazy. He hinted to HR that I had an attitude problem. Suddenly, colleagues who used to grab coffee with me avoided me. And it didn't stop at the office. Outside of work, Mark had connections in my social circle. And somehow, stories about me being incompetent started leaking into parties. Dinners, gatherings. Friends would ask, "Everything okay at work, man? Heard things are rough." That's when I knew. This wasn't just professional rivalry. Mark wanted to break me. Completely. But he didn't know. I was about to start fighting back. One night, after another humiliating day, I made a decision. If he was trying to destroy me, I wasn't going down quietly. I started documenting everything. Every snide email. Every contradictory instruction. Every unreasonable demand. I even kept a journal of what he said in meetings. Then came the first golden ticket. He left his office door open during a call, and I overheard him bragging to another manager that he was managing out dead weight. Dead weight. That's how he described me. I pulled out my phone and hit record. That was the moment my anger turned into strategy. The next few months were brutal. He kept tightening the screws, berating me in front of the team, giving me conflicting instructions, then filing performance notes against me. At one point, he even sabotaged a client presentation. He swapped my polished deck with an outdated version, making me look incompetent. I almost lost the client. And Mark? He swooped in to rescue the meeting, painting himself as the hero. That night, I sat in my car in the parking lot, hands shaking. For the first time, I thought about quitting. But then I remembered. Every lie, every humiliation, every whisper behind my back. And I decided, I'm not leaving. Not until I bury him with his own games. I got smarter. Instead of reacting, I started baiting him. I'd ask for clarification over email, forcing him to contradict himself in writing. I'd CC HR or other managers casually so his manipulations had an audience. And then, the jackpot. He sent me an email that said, "I don't care how you do it. Just make sure you fail quietly. I don't need another embarrassment on my team." Maybe he thought it was a joke. Maybe sarcasm. But I had it. In black and white. Just when I thought I had enough, something even bigger happened. A colleague pulled me aside. She whispered, "Daniel, I don't know if you know this, but Mark's been taking credit for your reports, presenting them as his own to leadership." I felt sick. But then, vindicated, because I had backups. Every draft, time-stamped, with my name all over them. Now I wasn't just a victim. I had proof. A fraud. And that was the final piece I needed. To end him, I compiled everything. The recordings, the emails, the journal logs, the stolen reports. Then I wrote a detailed report. Professional, calm, fact-based. And instead of sending it to HR Mark's buddies, I sent it directly to our regional director. And I CC'd the legal department. 48 hours later, Mark was suspended. 1 month later, he was gone. Not just from the company. Blacklisted from the entire industry. Turns out, I wasn't his first victim. But I was the first to have undeniable proof. And leadership? They apologized. To me, my reputation was restored. And Mark, he went from the big shot manager to an unemployed disgrace. Months later, I heard he tried to get a new job, but my company gave a very detailed reference. Meanwhile, I got promoted, not because I played politics, but because I refused to let a bully win. So to anyone listening, if someone tries to ruin you, don't just survive. Document, strategize, wait for the right moment, because sometimes the sweetest revenge is justice served cold. And trust me, it's worth every second.
Thank you for being here. If you enjoyed this, go watch the one of the left and don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel for more tales of triumph over injustice and a saga of ultimate revenge.